You're watching SpEd, and I'm your host, Sonya Dunn, and we're back with Cathy Healy. She is the Director of Training for PEATC, that's Parents Education Advocacy Training Center. And we were talking a little bit more about some of the programs that you have at PEATC. Now I know that you have another program, it's called Next Step. Now,
yes.
What is Next Step about?
Well, Next Steps is a program that is devoted and dedicated to students with disabilities who are in the process of transitioning out of high school. It is funded by a grant from the U.S. Department of Education Rehabilitative Services Administration, and we work with families and professionals and self-advocates themselves to help them understand about the rights and the roles and the laws and how to prepare for the future.
So what are some of the programs that you have with Next Step?
Well, primarily our function is to communicate information and training. And one of the ways that we have decided to communicate information is in a partnership with Virginia Commonwealth University. And we are promoting a webinar series so that, I always say, well, while parents have insomnia at 2 a.m., that instead of watching television or walking around the house, they can go to their computers and click on the archived webinar and they can get really great information about transition.
Now, tell me a little bit about as far as the purpose of the webinar program.
Well, we found that we can do a workshop and reach maybe 20 or 30 people. But it's really hard to replicate workshops around the state. We're small staff. There's not a lot of resources. Parents are reluctant to come out to workshops because everyone is getting spoiled with the internet now. They can just, download information that they need. So what we decided to do was experiment to see if, in fact, we would reach people by electronic methods. And
Right.
so that's why we're doing it through a webinar series.
As far as how do you incorporate educators and other administrators into the program?
Well, we are on state teams
Okay.
with educators, state and regional teams,
Okay.
and vocational rehabilitation counselors. So we work in partnership at all times with all of these different entities, professionals. They help us to understand the programs that they provide, and we help them to understand the parental perspective and how to better reach parents.
So how do you assist those soon-to-be adults with this program as well?
Well, we are really excited about this webinar series because on it we have actually got a couple of young people talking about their experiences. We have a young man who has worked at the Kennedy Center. It just so happens that he happens to have Down syndrome, but he's able to articulate his desire to be an actor. We have another webinar in which college students with disabilities and special health care needs talk about their experiences and how frightening it was for their parents and how they were able to calm their parents' fears. So we both learn from these self-advocates, and we also are able to communicate back to them information that we think would be helpful to them and connect them with other resources as well.
Now I understand that you have something called Transition Series as well. What's that in regards to?
And the Transition Series is actually a Next Steps workshop. It's an 8-module workshop. In the old days, when special education was just in becoming something,
Right.
We could put on workshops that lasted for hours and went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and people would actually come. Now we're having to streamline those kinds of workshops. But it is an 8-module workshop, and we go into communities and put on as many of them as people are wanting and asking for.
Okay. And then there's something coming up called Future Quest?
Future Quest is actually a program that is emanated from the Northern Virginia Transition Coalition,
Okay.
which is a group of professional educators, parents, providers universities, and it is a big conference that's coming up in November 21st at George Mason University. The target audience is youth with disabilities who are thinking about post-secondary education or employment, and their families.
And just to touch a little bit in regards to early intervention.
Right.
As far as what are some of the programs that you have, either with PEATC, PERC, or with PAS that you have with early intervention?
Well, early intervention is in of itself a part of the legislation under IDEA. It's Part C under IDEA, and the focus population are infants and toddlers 0 to 2 years of age. We do early intervention kinds of workshops with families, but by the time we get families, it's usually they're entering into the Part B segment of special education. But we can help families understand what early intervention is, why providers are suggesting things to them, how they can better be supportive of their babies at such a young age as well.
Now, you know, with early education, families start off on an IFSP, an Individual Family Service Plan, and then they go to an IEP, an Individual Education Plan. Now, are there programs in place to help parents understand the difference between the two and when one's appropriate and one's not appropriate to start?
Parents only have to pick up the phone to call us. But, you know, it's in all of this legislation, the theme is about parent involvement. And an IFSP is about a family service plan, because when you have an infant, it's certainly the family. And as the child ages, families are still involved. And by the time the child begins to transition out, the involvement begins to change. It becomes a very complex time for families. But their involvement is no less needed. It looks a little differently, because at that time, we want that young person to begin to speak up for themselves, making decisions for themselves, and really practicing how they are going to be as adults.
Well, we're out of time, but I would love to have you come back on to talk a little bit more about PEATC and some other things in regards to IDEA of 2004. Thank you so much for being on the show. At the dawning of each new day, there is new hopes, new dreams, and understanding. Always keep fighting and believing and keep having faith, because your child is worth it.